Welcome to the SENDcast. My name is Dale Pickles, the Managing Director of B Squared and the host of the SENDcast. If this is your first SENDcast, then welcome. The aim of the podcast is really simple. We want to reach lots and lots of people and help everyone learn more about special educational needs and disability. My guest this week is Joe Fautley, a project coordinator at the Council for Disabled Children. And Joe is autistic, has dyspraxia and anxiety. And alongside his day job, he is also a neurodiversity advocate. And on this week's show, we're discussing Joe's personal experiences and his advice for professionals. The SENDcast is created and produced by us here at B Squared. Everyone knows we help schools to show the small sets of progress pupils with SEND make across a wide range of abilities and ages. But do you know about Autism Progress? It is our framework for helping profile a pupil's autism and how it impacts them. It is based on certs and looks at communication, social interaction, emotional regulation, and flexible thinking. Autism Progress also includes a wide range of strategies to help support the pupils. Visit the B Squared website or click on the meeting link in the show notes to book a meeting with me to take you through how Autism Progress and our assessment software can help you. Now, let's get on with the podcast. In this week's show, we're discussing Joe Fautley's personal experiences and his advice for professionals. Now, this episode would absolutely make no sense unless my guest this week is Joe Fautley. Well, luckily it is. Joe is a project coordinator at the Council for Disabled Children, and Joe is autistic, has dyspraxia and anxiety. And alongside his day job, Joe is also a neurodiversity advocate, sharing his voice and his lived experiences. Welcome to the show, Joe.
Thank you. It's really great to have this opportunity to speak to you today and to be part of the podcast.
You are welcome. Now, on the podcast, we have discussed autism a lot. It is a really big topic that can be covered in so many ways because everyone with autism is different. And it's important to not only hear from professionals, but to also hear from autistic individuals about their experiences, what works for them, but also what impacts them. So, where do you want to start, Joe?
Thank you. Some of the work that I've been involved in, I'll be happy to speak about, which hopefully will be of interest to you, will be about my different advocacy work over the past few years. I was really fortunate, going back a few years ago, I was fortunate to be in contact, because currently my day job is at the National Children's Bureau, but I have also worked before this fall, I have also worked previously for the Council for Disabled Children as well. So this was a few years when I was invited to co-deliver training sessions. So this was a really great opportunity for me, where I worked alongside another young person at the time who's also autistic, and staff members as well from the team. So that was a really great experience. I got to be able to be involved in the planning, but also the designing, the whole process really of co-designing and also delivering each of the training sessions. And we got to reach out to quite a lot of professionals as well from across England in different regions. And it was really great. It really helped boost my confidence, especially with public speaking, which is still extremely challenging for me. But it really helped to also work alongside another young person at the time as well, which was really good.
So when you did that training, I'm guessing you were training professionals around autism. Was it a case of you were saying things they knew, or was it were you sharing things that they hadn't thought of because it came from your own personal experience?
So it was more of a variety of themes, really. So I worked in partnership with a team from the SENDcast network, which is the information, advice and support services networks that are across the country, and that provide each of those services provides advice and support for families and parents and carers, but also the young people themselves who have a disability. And so my role at the sessions was mostly to provide a personal lived experience perspective. So talking about a few different themes, for example, reasonable adjustments, and about different top tips and advice for how professionals across different settings can support autistic children and young people. And I think definitely having that lived experience for us with myself and also the young person with me as well, that really made a really big positive difference for that training. It's so much more powerful when you can have lived experience as part of the work, and that really helps other professionals to develop their work and how they can better support as well.
Definitely. You mentioned the reasonable adjustments. So what kind of reasonable adjustments helped you?
So reasonable adjustments can work differently for each individual, but for me, because I've always had a lot of anxiety and still have a lot of anxiety growing up, especially when I was a young person and then during my school days, mostly because, well, for different reasons, partly because it was really difficult for a lot of staff to understand my needs, and the way that the environment is, the school environment is not designed whatsoever for autistic children and young people. And so there's lots of things to consider in the school environment generally, for example, relating to sensory processing difficulties. Now that impacts everyone differently, and no one person is the same. It's really important to make sure to speak to the individual. But it really impacted me by a lot of the crowded spaces and the noise, particularly noise especially, is extremely difficult for me to manage. And that still is very difficult today as well. And so I have to have different ways of managing different sensory needs from that perspective as well.
Cool. So the bit I was kind of heading towards, which you've kind of really kind of highlighted there, is the reasonable adjustments to me have to come from the person. It can't be here is the list of reasonable adjustments we can offer. It's more like, what is it this person needs? And for you, as you said, it was that sensory, it was the noisy, crowded places. That's mainly the reasonable adjustment you needed to be able to deal with those environments.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, definitely from my own lived experience, going through my own, but also listening and learning more about other people's experiences along the way as well. It's really important to listen to the individual, because adjustments work best when it's based on the individual rather than a more generalized set of adjustments. But the problem is that it doesn't always work for everyone, because it depends on the setting and the environment that they're in as well. And everyone can have quite varied experiences of being listened to in that way.
So right now you're in Hackney
Yes.
at the National Children's Bureau in one of their meeting rooms. So you don't live in Hackney, you travel up there. I'm guessing you travel by train?
Yes, I travel by train. So I live in Surbiton in South London. So, but my day job is based in Hackney. So I normally go to the office once a week, and usually generally, but depending on what events really and different meetings are going on in my calendar from different weeks really. But most days of the week I do work at home, which helps me a lot, especially from the travelling side of things, because I get extremely anxious when travelling, and also still requires support as well for travelling, especially through the busy rush times as well, which is incredibly difficult. So it really helps to have that flexible working, and I've been very fortunate that where I work at the National Children's Bureau, they've been really supportive with adjustments and the flexible ways of working in that way, which is good.
So on that journey up, I'm guessing, well, I generally don't travel without my noise cancelling headphones because they are amazing. But do you use the same sort of strategies you were using at school? Have they continued and evolved, or is it a different kind of way of traveling? Is it different strategies you use?
So some of the strategies can be different depending on the environment, particularly really. But I do also have on my earphones as well, which I use, and that's been really helpful for reducing some of the intense, like especially when traveling through London, especially. Yeah, and also the flexibility of timings as well really helps to try and avoid like the peak rush a bit more and try and go at a bit more a different time that works out better for me.
And I know, sir, my got a colleague who lives in Surbiton. You probably have lots of platform changes where the platform is going to come in at platform 2. It's now changed to platform 1 with minimal time. So I'm guessing that adds to your anxiety.
Yeah, that can be quite. Yeah, I've had quite a few experiences when trains for all different reasons they can change at last minute notice, whether it's a platform change or suddenly the train has been delayed or cancelled. For example, when I went to Liverpool Street Station recently, because that's the main one of the main stations where I changed to get to the office. And there was most of the trains were cancelled on this particular time, so I had to find an alternative way of getting another train route to get to London Fields, which it's really stressful when it happens just suddenly out of the blue, and I have to process everything at really quite a fast pace and try and figure out a way that's going to I'm going to be able to manage that as much as I can, really.
And I'm just trying to put into kind of context that when we talk about children in school changing lessons, that busyness, when rooms change, when schedules change, they are things which you still struggle with, but it's now train cancellations, noisy, busy trains, but helping you learn how to manage that and strategies at school helps you going forward because you're still going to have to deal with these things, but it's rather than expecting a child to be able to deal with it, it's teaching them, okay, so this has happened. What can we do? Is a really crucial skill to teach young people with autism and other neurodiverse conditions.
Yes, definitely. It's really important to be able to have the right support in place from at different stages of life, like going through education and also going into adulthood and into the workplace. Really important to have that support in place from people that you can trust and that understand you and can help a lot with different types of adjustments and ways of managing like the world generally, really, like being able to navigate the social world and the social part of society particularly, and different parts of everyday life, really.
So we've mentioned the noise cancelling headphones. So in that rush hour traffic and the busy trains and getting up and down the escalators and all those sorts of things, is it just the noise that impacts you? Is it kind of the busy visual things? Is it kind of the people brushing past you? Is it all of them? What is it that impacts you? And we've mentioned the noise cancelling headphones, but kind of how do you kind of try and reduce the impact of the other things?
So quite a few factors come into that, really. So it's partly to do with the background noise. It can be difficult to focus and to concentrate when there's a lot of background noise because it's very difficult for me to filter out a lot of different sound in that way. So that's one part of it. And also the general busyness and the crowds. It's extremely difficult to try and navigate through crowds at quite a fast pace and like making decisions very quickly about which way to go to get to the right train that I want to get on. That can be very difficult, especially when there's not much space in general anyway. And then anything that changes very suddenly then just adds on top of the anxiety that's already there.
And I like talking about the travel part because it's something we all do. We all get on the trains. We've generally, at least once in our lives, been in a very busy underground station in London and gone, I don't like this.
Yeah.
So it's nice and relatable. But obviously, when you work at home, you've got a lot more control around your day, your environment, and things like that. But in the office, is your day as controlled and as planned out as you like it to be, or when others get involved, does it kind of change?
There can be some variation depending on if there's particular events or meetings that are going on in a certain way that can change as well. But for a general office day, I would normally arrive slightly later so I can avoid a bit more of the crowds. And then there's normally like a general time I would normally have lunch, and I do make sure that I have enough time to come away from my desk as well because that's really important. And sometimes I can struggle sometimes sort of knowing when the best time is to have breaks and to have that space away from my working desk, and that can be quite difficult to process sometimes. So I do make sure to be able to include that in the structure of the day as much as possible.
I'm going to ask you this because I can literally sit at my desk for 8 hours, not doing the same thing. So why do you need that time away from your desk? What is it you kind of need for that?
It's really important then to have that processing time, particularly if there's been quite a lot, or like it depends on the workload and like different meetings, and it's really important to have that space where I can just have that break and be able to like calm myself. For example, if there was something that was a bit more challenging at a certain time, then it's really important to have that space. And and then so sometimes I can do that, but sometimes more than others.
Yeah. I always use the getting up and going, making a cup of tea as that break, walk around the office. But generally, I think where we are, we've got a really relaxed office. So although I am at my desk, I can just sit there and watch some YouTube videos and quite relax with my headphones on and doing my own thing, or I'm on my phone.
Yeah.
But I think sometimes companies aren't fans of people doing that at their desk, are they?
Yeah, yeah, that all depends on the environment of the particular office environment. But I've been really fortunate that it's a really good culture and way of working here, and there's a few spaces where I can go and to have some time to myself when I need it. We do have a room for well-being as well. That's for any staff that need some time out. So that's been really helpful. I use that quite often as well.
And kind of the things you're talking about aren't that dissimilar to kind of what is recommended for children in schools, movement breaks, timeouts, just to kind of
Yeah.
regulate and things like that. I'm going to say you're still doing it. It sounds like a derogatory when I say that, but my point is it helps you now. It's not while you're a child to get through school. It is actually a lifelong thing.
Yeah, quite a lot of these like different strategies and different adjustments really that were important when I was a child, and are important for lots of children and young people who are autistic or have other neurodiverse. But that's also really important in adulthood as well, and in different environments. And some of these strategies I've also like previously written about as well for professionals as well. So for an article I recently wrote for SEN magazine, that included different key points of advice for primarily it was aimed at teachers and different staff in education to help support young people. But that can also be related to other environments as well. For example, different ways to help manage fatigue, and especially in the case of autism, that fatigue and burnout is really important parts of being autistic that people do need to take more seriously.
So I'm guessing like your day to day, you're at home most of the time, you go into the office one day a week, but then let's say you have an event coming up. So you're going to go somewhere completely different. I'm guessing you very much, you know what you need and you go and find that there beforehand. Do you kind of like, right, I'm going to need somewhere I can get away? Do you kind of plan that early on, or do you kind of try and find it later on?
Yeah, so generally, a lot of this is sort of planned beforehand as much as possible. Really, it all depends on the particular event really that's going on. But yeah, it's really important for me for traveling, and because I have support with traveling as well. So that's part of planning in advance as well, making sure I've got the right support person to help me with like traveling, and also that for a new location as well, if there's a particular event going on at a different venue, for example. And then there's different things to consider about the venues. So if it was a workshop that was in person or some event, yeah, it really helps to have that quiet room that's booked in advance as well. So that's really important, and I've made sure that's been included in different planning for events as well. So that can help me, but also other colleagues as well who may need some time out for different reasons to have that space away from the main room because it can get very overwhelming.
That's the thing is, often those reasonable adjustments might be put in place in school, but when you go on a school trip somewhere, it's easy for those kind of adjustments not to be kind of thought about on that day because it's a completely different day. They'll be fine. We're out and about. They'll be fine. But in some ways, they need more reasonable adjustments because it isn't the same. It's a new environment, but they also will still need the same quiet rooms like you've been kind of organising and making sure are available.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, definitely really important. That's really important as well, that the different settings in education can really benefit from by having these strategies, which are often quite simple and quite easy to do in regards to like having that space to support young people who need some time out. And that can really make, even though it can be a small change, but it makes a really big impact on the individual.
So we've kind of haven't really we haven't labeled any of the things you struggle with as this is autistic or this is anxiety. Because I think when you have multiple, it kind of all overlaps and it's hard. You can't really separate them. But a lot of what we're talking about, support, as you said, can support a number of people. Everyone's impacted differently. But it is, with autism, we often like that rigidity. We like to know what's coming, but which is exactly the same with anxiety. I like to know where I'm going, what's going to happen, what it's going to look like. So it isn't just a case of thing of this is something you do for autistic people. As you've been saying all the way through, that if they have this, it can help my co-workers, it can help my colleagues who can also benefit. So there's lots of little things people can do can benefit everyone.
Yes, definitely. Definitely, yeah. So many people can really, it can make a difference really positively. For example, thinking about other colleagues in the workplace. I've got my own experience through. So I'm currently at my workplace, but outside of my job, but as a more voluntary aspect of working where I am, I've been co-chairing a staff network for colleagues who have neurodiversity or have a disability, and also including mental health as well. And that's been really successful, and I'm been really fortunate. It's been established for about a year and a half now since it was originally set up. So I co-chair with another colleague who is also neurodiverse as well. And it's been really great to see the positive impact that staff network has on quite a variety of colleagues, because it has different purposes to it. But partly it helps to get that sense of community, because quite often, depending on the individual workplaces, because they're all different, but many workplaces don't always have that community feel to them, and especially for any staff who, whether they have a diagnosis of a type of neurodiversity, for example, or some people may not have a diagnosis, or may not feel comfortable with speaking about different support needs that they need at work. And so this network has really helped bring people together from all walks of life, different teams, to really help encourage everyone to feel more comfortable and more supported. And it's really helped other staff as well to be able to talk in a safe space where we have discussions that are confidential, but we also have a good working relationship with senior colleagues as well, to be able to drive positive change and making different changes or adjustments in the workplace has been going really well.
Nice. And what I was just thinking about there is, are there sort of things that maybe adaptations that were put in maybe for one or two people, as you've shared it with others, kind of more and more people use, like as you said, the quiet rooms, things like that. As that network has grown, have you found those spaces you used by more people?
Yeah, the network has definitely grown over since we started, and that's been really beneficial, because we're able to get more perspective from more members of the group. Yeah, the wellbeing room is something that, as a network, we'd originally supported, like near to when it was first created, and to have that dedicated space, that's been one part of what we've been able to help to achieve. But also, we've involved in different communications across the organisation, helping to reach out when it's particular times when it's important to raise awareness and understanding. We've helped to send out communications to all staff. So, and sometimes that can include lived experience stories as well. So we've been really grateful for some colleagues who have been able to share anonymously about some of their lived experience, like providing some testimony. And that's really made a difference as well, because it's really helped other colleagues who may not usually speak openly about these types of topics, but knowing that there are other staff who do have similarities in different ways for support needs, that really makes a big difference as well.
That's the thing. I think reading a definition of autism, being told someone is autistic, you're still kind of going, I don't know what that means. I don't know what that looks like. I don't know what I should or shouldn't be doing. And the ability to share those lived experiences anonymously or not anonymously, but kind of going, look, this is how it impacts me, this is sort of thing, helps people actually really to see, oh, that's what that means. That's what that looks like. That's what I need to do. And as you said, having those safe space to have those confidential questions where to go, look, I don't know what anxiety is. I don't know what this is. I don't know how to support this. Or he was fine yesterday, he's not today. Why? It's about to have a nice, safe place that you feel. Because generally, with a lot of people who ask those questions are doing it from a place they want to understand.
Yeah, there's quite a lot of that I can relate to as well through my own experiences and also in the workplace. Yeah, because the majority of people really do want to understand and really do want to make things better, but not everyone always has the same understanding and the same strategies in place. But as part of the network, we've been able to help support other members who usually wouldn't usually speak to other people in their teams, like their line managers or other more senior colleagues. And so we've helped to encourage members to be able to start having those conversations in a way that works best for them. And it's really important when we can hear their feedback as well from the members who say that they've been having conversations and they felt listened to and felt supported.
Excellent. Now, in the information you've sent me 4 key points, which are really good discussion points. And the top one I really like because I think it is really important. So it's don't underestimate anxiety. And I think when we think of anxiety, we think of a constant. We think of that person has anxiety. This is where they are, but it's not. It's not constant, is it?
Yeah, that's really anxiety levels are different for everyone, but for me, anxiety is always there to some extent in the background, but it can be triggered often by particular situations. For example, for me, I encounter anxiety on a daily basis, and this impacts on my life generally. But generally, people who are autistic are often more likely to experience higher levels of anxiety because being able to navigate the social world with lots of sensory aspects to it, that can often be quite a common trigger for anxiety as well. And so I've always made sure that when I've given like talks or presentations before to professionals, or when I've written in articles before, I've always made sure to include that as one of the really important points, because too often from my own lived experience, lots of people have often really underestimated my own anxiety. But because I come across as really calm and the way I come across, I don't really show my anxiety really obviously, because I'm quite a quiet person as well, and generally, so I don't always make it obvious like through my speech and like when I'm anxious. So it's really important to really make sure that everyone, like people in education, for example, we really do take that seriously.
Talked to one of my other guests, Ali Knowles. I said, I don't get anxious because I do this, this, this. She went, oh, so you are anxious. You just deal with it that way. And I was like, that's a very good point. And that's the thing is, just because someone doesn't appear anxious doesn't mean they aren't. And going back to kind of you're traveling to work, that trains get cancelled, is you could have one day in the office, travel to work, life is good. The next week you go in theory, it's the same journey, but platform changes, train cancellations, extra busy that time because there's an event on, can really impact how you arrive at the office, which can then impact that first conversation you have. And you're like, but you always travel to work. You always get the train to work. I don't see what it's misunderstanding. And as you said, underestimating anxiety and those events and how they impact you.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. It's really important. Really important that everyone is like really understands that. It can often depend on the individual day and different circumstances that happen that can often be out of our control, and quite often, for example, with trains. But I've been really fortunate that I have a really good working relationship with my line manager and my colleagues in my team who are really supportive. And I always make sure that if something like that happens out of the blue, I always make sure that they're always aware of that, and that I feel that I feel calm and I feel open to be able to talk about anything like that may have happened in the day that has caused me a lot of stress. Then yeah, that's really helpful.
That was going to be one of my questions is when you are kind of extra anxious, you're worrying, it's been a bad day, a bad journey to work. I was going to ask you, is that kind of, do you feel you have to bring it up? Do you feel pressured? But as you said, it seems like a really open conversation where you can say, look, this happened, wasn't great. And then you hopefully have a conversation around how to change things next time if possible. Is that kind of what happens?
Yeah, yeah, so yeah, I do make sure that I do let my colleagues know that if there's something that happens like that, then that's really important because as part of like different work that I've been involved in over the years, we've been an advocate for autism. I always try to help other people feel more open and more confident that they can communicate about how they're feeling and their emotions in that way. And well, especially because my own lived experience, I've always had a lot of difficulty like growing up myself with talking about how I'm feeling really, and that's because of my speech and language challenges like throughout my life that has made it really difficult to be able to speak verbally to people and to be able to process what people say as well. So yeah, so that's really important, and yeah, and it's definitely made a difference to me in the workplace as well.
And I think now you kind of recognize the signs, you recognize the triggers, you kind of feel it. But that probably wasn't always the case. You probably didn't recognize the triggers. You probably didn't recognize how you were feeling, but you just knew you might not even notice. But that's a journey I think every person goes on. But it's trying to find that support. And it's not a case of you'll always say, I'm anxious. It's you've got to learn that, haven't you?
Yeah, definitely. It's being able to show to other people from that perspective takes a lot of time and a lot of patience, especially like someone like me who has always had a lot of speech and language difficulties with autism and also dyspraxia that come together in that way and that affects my speech. So yeah, it's a process that it's a gradual process. It takes a lot of time, and it needs people who are kind and people who are patient with individuals to be able to have that good working good relationship and good understanding, which makes a positive impact.
Definitely. So your next key point was give time to process information. And that's a really good thing because I think we all kind of read things, and sometimes that deeper understanding of something comes later. And depending, I suppose, what's going on is how quickly we can process information can change.
Yeah, definitely. I think again it depends on the individual and the way that we process information. It is different and can change. But generally, autistic people have lots of difficulties with being able to interpret language. So that's including verbal language, also non-verbal, like other body language or social cues, for example. So being able to read other people. So in that way, to be able to recognise or to understand other people and how they're feeling, and then also being able to express our own emotions, which comes into that as well. So, some of the information that I've written before for professionals is that it's really important to give plenty of time for children and young people to process information, because it's really difficult for us to filter everything that's being said to us. And sometimes depends on the situation, but it can lead to sensory overload if there's too much information. So really being aware of the sensory environment really has an impact on how much information that the individual child or young person is able to recognise and to be able to process. So, for example, if there was a particular environment that had quite a lot of crowds or a lot of background noise, for example, in the school environment, then when given the information, it really helps to speak slowly, but also not ask too many questions, depending on the individual, and having that time to be able to have that break and that pause between words to give them time to process, and also using different methods as well, because not everyone can communicate verbally, depending on the individual, really.
I think for me, one of the things which has really helped is being explicit with what you're saying, leaving it less open to interpretation. My nephew once got into trouble because the homework said research, I'm going to say volcanic rocks. It was research something. So he went and read a book all about them and finished. He didn't write anything because it did not say write anything. It said research. And the teacher was like, well, how is he going to show me he's researched unless he's written anything? It's like, but you didn't say write anything. You said research. And it's understanding what is it you're expecting, being more explicit with that reduces that anxiety because it's really clear what the expectations are.
Yeah, definitely. That's something that I've previously talked about to people as well, is about how making sure that the language that people use has to be very clear and very structured, because otherwise there's too many interpretations of what someone is trying to tell you. And so yeah, and using language that's clear, that's really easy to understand. That doesn't include jargon as well, because quite often, depending on the setting, but language can often include too much jargon as well, and so that's been quite difficult to understand.
And when we think about this, is I always like to think of recipes are quite great fun. You're going to cook something. You wouldn't want to have to read through the recipe to work out what is I need. So we quite simply, we put a list of ingredients at the top, the key bits you're going to need before you start. That's nice and explicit. If you haven't got this, don't do this recipe. Whereas if we kind of hid that information in between, you might get to the point and go, I haven't got that. So it's things like that. It's those sorts of things really help. And when we think about that explicit, it's being really clear with what is needed, what is expected from that point of view. Don't hide it. Those nice, simple things, and we have it with meetings. We often summarize a meeting with tasks. We don't kind of leave it to each person to take away their own understanding. We try and have an agreed understanding of this is what we discuss, this is what we all believe, and these are the 10 things we're going to do, and that one Joe's going to do, and that one Dale's going to do. All really clear. And we do that in the business world. We do that in the adult world quite a lot. But it kind of, we need to kind of bring that sort of thing into schools so those children know really quite clearly, this is what is expected of me.
Yes, definitely, because so much of that way of working, we're using, I'm using the workplace, but it's really important also for education as well, and for children and young people, to make sure that it's very clear for them as well.
Definitely. Third point, don't forget autistic fatigue and burnout. This is something because I've got autism and ADHD, and I say I don't have these, but then as I sit and think about it, I'm going, well, actually I do. I can do something for a period of days, but I need a couple of days just to relax afterwards. Perhaps that is burnout, but I don't know. And that's the thing is, I'm 45 and I'm still trying to work out what that looks like for me. Does it have... So it does happen. It's different for, and they might not even recognize they are doing this. So do you get fatigue and burnout?
Yeah, that's for a very long time. That's always been a big part of my life, growing up when I was younger, but also still today as well. As it's a really big part of my life. The people who are autistic can often it can often be more challenging for autistic people for various reasons, but because of the pressures of everyday life and being able to navigate social situations with a lot of often sensory processing needs as well, being able to manage a lot of the pressures can often lead to a lot of exhaustion. But what's specifically often called autistic fatigue, which is fatigue that happens much more because of our particular autistic ways of being able to process the world around us. So particularly when I've had a stressful day, if it's been quite a busy day with quite a lot of like communication involved and going through environments that trigger my anxiety as well. So that can often cause fatigue, and especially I really notice by the end of the day, like how much fatigue do I feel by the end of the day. Yeah, that I really experience that quite a lot. But something that I've written before about fatigue is that for children and young people and the school environment, for example, it really helps that if teachers can allow more time for rest breaks, and to encourage different ways for them to be able to be more calm. For example, like breathing exercises and mindfulness as well, and being able to like plan and to balance their activities and energy levels as well, because our energy levels do change quite a lot during the day.
So you work from home 4 days a week, you're in the office 1 day a week. As you kind of learn more about yourself and the way you do things, and I'm gathering you've probably shaped your life to fit that in, have you reduced the amount of fatigue and burnouts that you're having?
The fatigue still happens, but it sort of depends on the individual day, and sometimes I'm able to better manage it more than others. Particularly, in a general way, I do notice after an office day, when I've come home after the office, I feel extremely exhausted, just because of so much of having to process every part of the day, really. So that includes like I mentioned before earlier, like traveling, but also different situations that can happen, and that involves different I like social situations, but also and also anything else that can happen during the day as well. So yeah, particularly after that, I do notice it during the end of the day.
We found, and it kind of, I didn't notice it, it took my wife to notice it, that whenever we used to go on a holiday, and generally it was the foreign holidays, and we'd get up early, get to the airport, sometimes the wrong terminal, which was my fault, get to the right terminal, get to the plane, do the flight. My wife wasn't a great flyer, so kind of generally I was leading and I had my children and my wife following. My wife was worrying about so kind of like that. And then you get there and it's like, right, I'm now in an airport I've never been to before. I've got to get to the hotel. Apparently there's a coach somewhere where I've never been. You get on the coach. It's, am I going to get off the right hotel? You get to the hotel. I hope the room's all right. You get there. And what's interesting, even if you're camping, it was traveling there, putting the tent up, again, like that. Generally, I'd get a migraine. And it was kind of this just processing everything that's going on that day and just completely burning out at the end of that day.
Yeah, yeah, I completely understand from your perspective as well, because yeah, there's so much for us to process during the day as well, and things that can often like happen at quite a fast pace as well. Because often I can struggle to be able to respond and to be able to process information at a really fast pace. So yeah, that can be quite a big challenge as well.
It seems I can process at a fast pace, but it comes with a cost later on.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's what I find. I'm often like, if we go to the tortoise and the hare analogy, I am often that hare. I am off. I will get a load of work done and then just kind of crash. And we kind of will keep pace, but I will do it maybe in sprints with rests. Sprint, rest. I kind of find that I'm more like that I'll get a project, I'll dive in, I'll get cracking. I might even finish that project, but then I'll need a rest. And people have talked about kind of people being kind of abused for that. Oh, he can get all of that work done. Let's give it to them. And it's like, in reality, I get the same amount of work done as someone else. I just maybe do it in a compressed amount of time, but then you need the time afterwards to kind of recover. So it's finding for you what works for you and kind of being aware and helping others be aware, as you said, about how you are and how that impacts you.
Yeah, definitely really important, and it's always gonna be a learning process as well, and it's a process that throughout my life I find that there can be different ways to help manage fatigue as well, and like being able to structure the day differently, and that's why it's been really great, where I work currently because of having that flexibility during my job as well, and that really makes a difference. So things can be changed, like in terms of structure as well.
Your fourth and final talking point is a huge thing, not even for neurodiversity, for everyone. Avoid making assumptions. I hate assumptions. I hate them. But it is, I think neurodiverse people can make assumptions, but you can also make assumptions about neurodiverse people by acting without all the information. So for me, one of the things I assumed from my own personal experience is I believed my daughter has autism. I believe from quite a young age for her. So I try to support her in everything I saw. So all the things I noticed, I supported. Therefore, and I really know it's looking back, it was so stupid. And I completely understand it now that I was just dealing with what I was seeing, not what was going on the inside. And because I kind of removed where she struggled by supporting it and giving strategies, I assumed life was going to be all right. But it wasn't. She was struggling on the inside, unsure. So I had made an assumption that I'd reduced the external visible struggles, but it hadn't impacted what was going on inside.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And that's something. This is one of the themes that I've often spoke about when I've talked about my experiences to different audiences. It is about avoiding making assumptions because I've had my own experience of where professionals when I was younger, they've often assumed, for example, because I did well with my studies when I was at school, and I was good with my academic studies. But often professionals didn't realise that because of that I still needed lots of support in many other ways of life. So, for example, socially, for my communication and my interaction skills with people, and about lots of support with everyday life skills as well. That was something that's often been misunderstood. And I know from speaking to other colleagues as well that can be something that's often described by other children and young people. So yes, in a school setting, a student who is autistic, who is successful academically, they can still have significant needs that impact on their daily life. And it's really important to know that no one person is the same. It's always essential to take the time to listen and to find out what adjustments they may need, what works best for the individual. Especially, it's interesting as well because I've mentioned to other people as well about viewing the autism spectrum through four key areas of difference, really. So that includes understanding and using language, being able to think inflexibly, being able to understand others, and also from sensory processing as well. So, yeah, that's something that's really important.
And I think I was similar to you, is academically I was great, did really well. Socially, I didn't. Maths, there were rules, predictable, things like that. Reading a book, predictable. Going and playing a game about a TV show I didn't know or whatever, or playing football and being the last picked or not picked. Lot of anxiety. I didn't know the rules. I didn't know what I was supposed to. I didn't know how to not be in that situation. And I think in schools, if you're not disruptive, you can disappear. That child who spends all lunchtime reading, yes, they may love books, or it might be the only thing they know how to do, and it's comforting because it's got that certainty aspect, because no one's they don't know how to socialize. And if you can find a way to help them socialize and teach them those skills, and it might be more explicit, this is what you need to do and this is how but because they're not disruptive, people assume everything's fine.
Yeah, I can often relate to that as well through my own personal experiences. Being able to navigate the social world is extremely difficult, because being able to have those connections with people socially and being able to make friends and to have those connections that doesn't come naturally to lots of autistic people, and it's something that we don't have automatically, like often neurotypical people do. Being able, because often neurotypicals, they often have those automatic skills where they can, they can make connections with people and they socially. So it's always been a very gradual, like, learning process for me and for lots of other autistic people. And it can be quite difficult, especially when there's been bad experiences. And often autistic people are often misunderstood, where they want to be able to make friends and to have positive connections with people, but often they can be misunderstood or judged quite a lot. And some people can be quite judgmental, which is quite difficult.
And I think that judgmental in school isn't the best place to learn how to make friends, because generally it can be quite ruthless and horrible and non-supportive. For me, I used to work at IKEA and worked there for 6 generally amazing years. But that's where I learned most of my social skills. That's where I learned how to have conversations, how to be interested in someone else rather than just talking about what I want and various things like that. And it was very much because I was with a group of people who were just nice. They weren't, if I said something, going to use it against me. I was in an adult world, and they would say if I'm wrong or right, and they wouldn't do something and then do something else. It was quite, I would say, more honest. Whereas at school, my daughter does struggle with somebody says one thing but then does the opposite, and she struggles with that. And I find in the adult world there's a lot less of that, which makes it easier to learn those skills.
Yeah, that's really interesting, and it often depends on having really good people around you in those environments as well. That can make a big difference, and people that are patient and supportive, and people that are able to support in those ways socially is really important. And from my own lived experience, I've been really fortunate to have met different people along the way in different times of my work that have been really supportive, and that's really helped me gain confidence, like gradually gaining confidence growing up as a young person, and then now as an adult in the workplace. Yeah, that's been really helpful.
So right at the beginning, you talked about the training you were involved with in planning, organising and delivering. And I'm guessing that it meant standing up in front of people, doing the talking and doing. How does doing this podcast compare? Is it because it's just you and me in a room and no one else is here? Does it make it easier? Is it kind of, well, I've never done one before, so I don't know how is it different? How has the podcast been for you?
I'm really grateful to have this opportunity. Definitely to be featured on the podcast. This is the first time that I've took part in the podcast recording, and so yeah, it's a really great opportunity. I always have a lot of anxiety in situations like this, but also other environments as well, where I worry a lot about my speech. My speech is not always very fluent, and I do have a stammer as well. And with the autism and dyspraxia as well, that they both impact on my speech in slightly different ways. So yeah, I always have that anxiety. But this is different from an in-person event, for example, because this is a recording obviously with both of us. But yeah, for an in-person event is very different, and it requires a lot more different preparation and different processing involved in being able to do that. I've been really lucky that I've been able to have those opportunities, because I know that lots of autistic people are not always able to have those opportunities, and I'm really grateful. It's always a challenge though, because even today I still get extremely anxious when I'm doing public speaking, when I'm taking part in like a workshop or doing a presentation to an audience. Yeah, it requires a lot of patience and a lot of gradual building confidence. But I've only been able to do that because of having great people throughout the years that have been really supportive, and it really helps to gradually support me in that way. So that's been really good.
That's the thing. I think with anything like public speaking, is the first one is always horrible and it generally goes absolutely wrong. But that's fine. Because I always find with everything is each time you do it, you get slightly better. You learn what worked well, you learn what didn't work well, and you try and improve. And I think the more you do it, and also the more kind of response you get from people gives you more confidence. But it's having those opportunities to be able to go do it and get that useful, constructive feedback to help you grow.
Yeah, definitely, really having that positive type of environment where we do get feedback and ways that we can help develop skills in that way is really helpful. And I know that from when I first started doing sort of more speaking activities when I was a young person, and it's always really helped by working alongside other people who also have different needs as well, because I felt like I wasn't by myself, and that there was lots of other people who also found it extremely challenging, to be able to do the speaking activities, but being able to be alongside them, and also and different opportunities over the years that I've been involved in, where I've worked as part of a team as well. So I'm not completely on my own. I'm always with people, and we can share the experience, and to be able to support each other as well.
Well, thank you for coming on the show today. I really enjoyed it. It was a nice, good, great conversation. You didn't come across, well, I would say you didn't come across nervous. It's like me saying you don't look autistic. That's a stupid saying, because it's not at all reflective on what's going on the inside, which is, again, that assumption I made with my daughter. So just because someone doesn't look or come across as doesn't mean that's not what's going on the inside. And that's an important thing to understand.
Yeah, that's a really important message, and yeah, thank you very much. I really enjoyed taking part in the podcast today, and it's been a fantastic opportunity.
You are welcome. Now, Joe mentioned his article he wrote for Send magazine. So Joe's given me loads of links. So he's given me that article, one he's done for Nation Connect magazine, interview with SENDcast, various other videos. So all of those are in the show notes, as always, along with how you can get hold of Joe. And Joe does lots of, as he said, volunteer work, advocating, talking, training, loads of stuff. So you can get hold of Joe in a couple of different ways. And as I said, you'll find those in the show notes, which are wherever you listen to the podcast or on the SENDcast website. Thank you for listening to the show. If you aren't following us on social media, please start following us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and now even TikTok. We are the SENDcast. And the SENDcast is created and produced by us here at B Squared. We help to show the small steps of progress people with SEND make. But do you know about Autism Progress? This is our framework for helping profile a pupil's autism and how it impacts them. It's based on certs and looks at communication, social interaction, emotional regulation, and flexible thinking, which are quite similar to the 4 areas you mentioned, Joe. And Autism Progress also includes a wide range of strategies to help support those pupils. Visit the B Square website or click on the meeting link in the show notes to book a meeting with me to take you through our assessment software and how it can help you. Thank you for listening. We'll be back next week with another episode of the SENDcast. It is goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from me.
Bye, everyone.